Thank you very much, Tom, for that introduction. I was going to actually do an introduction, but now I don't need to do that. Again, my name is Kim Giles. I'm a project director with the MovePlan group. We are a move and change consulting company. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to be participating in a team with my distinguished colleagues here of Steve Elias and Hugh Peltz for a wonderful project that was done in Johnston, Rhode Island that has finished, and we're now in maintenance mode at this point.
That's right.
Sorry. So we were actually, as a consultant, we were asked to join the project as Citizens was faced with a decision to either spend a lot of money and renovate their existing buildings or take a leap of faith and actually embark upon purchasing a parcel of land and building a build-to-suit campus for over 5,000 staff. We're going to spend our time talking to you about those decision points that were made by citizens and how our team was actually asked to support the change management journey. So a very nice segue from the earlier conversation. We had lots of rhinos. We had a lot of people who were fearful and resistant to that change. And so we'll spend our time today challenging you to think about your own change management programs and your projects today as well. I'll give it to Steve.
Thanks, Kim. So I think just to set the backdrop, Citizens was, up until 2014, owned by Royal Bank of Scotland, and I guess we were sort of a cash cow, right? There was limited investment in our space. We had a facility in Cranston that was a couple 100,000 square feet, one massive floor plate, no windows, right? So fast forward to 2014, we were going public, right? And we really needed to create a new image of our company and really create a new sort of workplace for our colleagues. So we had a burning platform, breaking away from Royal Bank of Scotland, really becoming our own bank and creating our own vision. But as you, as facility managers, know, you really need to make the economics work. I mean, my guess is your boss or the CEO isn't coming to you saying, hey, here's a pile of cash, go spend it, right? So we took a hard look at our existing facilities and the underinvestment over the past however many years we were there, and there was a lot of investment that would be needed just to bring these facilities up to a certain standard. Not great, right? Not more windows, not flashy new technology, just making the building run and have people be comfortable at least. So I think, Hugh, how many rooftop units did we have?
Yeah, so there's not often an audience that could appreciate this more than you guys. We had 65 rooftop units in Cranston, and that was vintage circa 1985. And up, so pretty difficult space to try to maintain.
Yeah, so the time was right for us, but we also had to take a business case and really make it work. So when we compared our existing facilities scattered throughout Rhode Island, and we compared that to a long-term investment, going out, purchasing land and building our own site, the economics really weren't that much different. So then that got people's attention, and we really got that platform to say, hey, yeah, you know what, let's go and look at parcels of land throughout Rhode Island and see what would work best for us. So we did that, and we selected a site in Johnston, Rhode Island. Then we had to convince colleagues that we were actually going to do this because, Citizens colleagues were very skeptical that we would actually invest in the facilities at this point. So we said, yes, we're doing this, and we started to uncover some really cultural challenges. I think we talked about the culture of scarcity, right? So,
Or hoarding.
Hoarding, right?
Call it.
You would find used monitors on the top of file cabinets, supplies all over the place in file cabinets and in desks. So we wanted to use this project as a chance to take colleagues along on the journey, really give them a voice, and make sure that they had multiple different ways of getting information from Mike Knipper, my boss's blog, to the intranet, to, I think we did 150 tours of the site.
Yeah, which gave a lot of angst to our general contractor, right? So when we started this project, we recognized that we were coming from substandard, and when it says Class B, C, I'm not sure there's a D space, but if there is, we had some of that, right? And so we recognize that as an opportunity to immediately begin to engage colleagues in this change management journey, right? And part of that journey was being able to leverage the buzz and excitement once we actually announced we were going to do the project. The next thing we did is we went to our general contractor and said, hey, guess what? We're going to be bringing people through here with hard hats and vests, right? And that kind of freaked him out. But I got to be honest, that was a key part of the change management platform.
Yeah.
So as we move on to the next slide, just a couple things, right? So we had the need for a cultural change, right? We went from a foreign-owned, underinvested bank to biggest bank IPO in history. Let's make this thing splash. Let's create a culture of a big American bank that wants to be transparent and lead the way with our colleagues and our facilities. So we had that great cultural pitch. Never forget when you guys are doing these things, the criticality of that solid business case. So we had a really nice foundation there because like Steve said, CFO doesn't really care so much about whether you have the cool new technology, right? They care about that bottom line. We had both, so that's important.
Yeah, and to just finish out the cultural component, as the change consultants, Steve and Hugh were so eloquently giving me also, by the way, we're not just building this new building, but we're not going to build 100% seats for everybody. So we had to do a desk ratio process in that change management strategy, which was interesting, and we had definitely people who were resistant to it, but very successful.
Yeah, so just to segue into the next slide, I mean, we recognized as a company we didn't have the change management experience. We dabbled in it, but that's where we, reached out to Kim and the MovePlan team and said, hey, we really need you to develop a program that's going to tackle some of these challenges that we have with colleagues and sort of where they're coming from, and also make sure that we're communicating effectively throughout the project. So that's really where we brought in Kim and the MovePlan team to help us out. So we did end up buying a piece of land in Johnston, 420,000 square foot facility, roughly 3,200 colleagues. As Kim mentioned, not one-to-one seating, so lots of different changes. But just to give you an idea, I mean, Rhode Island's our backyard. Right, we have 40% market share. Our colleagues are our customers. Our neighbors are our customers. Right, so there is a huge community aspect of this to really, it's not easy. We upset some people in the process that live along the road that we are on now, but we had an opportunity to give back. So the community, the campus is open to the community. There's playing fields. There's walking trails. So we had that aspect of it to really bring forth part of our credo, which is our customers, and give them an opportunity to really benefit from the campus as well. The other piece, again, we'll talk more about today, is the change management and how we really had to overcome a lot of the struggles with colleagues, misconceptions, that culture of scarcity, and then all the other changes like new technology, you may not get your own seat, even something as silly as having to go over the bridge to get to the campus if you live on the other side of town. So I'll pass it over to Kim to talk more about the change management process.
So with change management, as you heard earlier today, there's a whole variety of emotions that kind of go through that change. And so at the outset of this project, working with the architect and with the citizens team and the contractor, we all felt like this was all going to be a positive change. We were moving from buildings that had no windows, not enough space, that had not enough conference space for everybody who wanted it, to that, which bred that hoarding mentality, people booking conference rooms and then never using them just to say they had them in case they needed them. So we had a lot of obstacles to overcome from that perspective, but we all saw this as a positive change. But as you all know and heard, change is very difficult for everybody. And there are people who are resistant because they don't want to drive over the bridge. So commutes changed a little bit for some folks, as well as, they were not all going to be guaranteed as actual seats in the new building, which... That
commute thing's a little bit unique in Rhode Island, by the way. The metric that I'm sure a lot of you have heard when you move, it's got to be greater than 8 to 9 miles, and then you have to manage the change in the commute. Rhode Island, 2 miles.
Yeah. Very difficult for some. So part of our process was early on to assess what were the changes going to be in the building, understanding from the architectural team what were those changes that we were being proposed to try and journey people through. And part of that was also to make sure that we involved as many people as we could in that decision-making process. As you all know, as long as people feel involved in the decisions, they're going to buy into those decisions a little bit easier. So our first steps were to actually identify those right people who are going to sit in our team. We very early on decided to call them ambassadors. We nominated various levels of ambassadors to help us drive the messages. So those included senior decision makers who had a voice, who could tell us what was actually going to work for their business lines. We also had change and move champions, so people who were more logistically and tactically speaking with us. And then we had design team members who were actually frontline colleagues, middle line managers who were involved in helping to decide what furniture would go into their new neighborhood. There were some small changes or selections that they had options to pick from, and so we allowed them to kind of evaluate what would work well for them and give them those choices. So involving all of them we felt was very helpful, and we felt like that actually added to the communication process over a course of time. We then had to teach them how to use these new spaces. So in that strategy, we prepared a lot of workshops, focus groups, tours, as you heard earlier, 150 to that effect. And many business lines were actually coming through multiple times because the campus construction process was over 2 years, right, Hugh and Steve?
Yeah, and I think one of the things our boss, the head of property, did really well is he found a way to create a blog despite technology challenges. I think it was really a SharePoint site. Yeah. But he created this blog, and I think he had a couple of thousand colleagues regularly viewing it. And I think what they liked about the blog was it was real-time, transparent, no BS commentary from the head of property about what was going on. And oh, by the way, if you want to be the first to see a picture of the steel beams going up, you can only see it on the blog. Or I'm going to give away another tour for your team or pizza or something. And the only way you're going to have an opportunity to do that is to post on the blog. And people really got into it. Like Kim said, there were some teams that went through 2 or 3 times. So again, picking those various communication channels and giving them a voice and giving colleagues a voice and how they can engage was huge throughout the project. I mean, the return on investment from day one when we put shovels in the ground, like we were getting runway out of this project before it was even built. And that was huge.
No, I think that's a great point. And even to take it down one level with the blog, look, we're a great big bank. Corporate communications, a lot of angst with somebody out there typing a blog, right? So, and so once we got past that, and once he said, listen, I either get to type the blog or I don't do it, right? It's not going to be censored. It's not going to be cleansed. And it set a very transparent stage, right? So there were some difficult questions that were posed on that blog, right? As we went through this change management process and rumors got out there, some of those rumors turned out to be true. Like, you might not have a seat in this new campus. I'm not going to have a seat on the new campus. He responded to those questions. So as you guys think about your change management program and how to do that, think about that authenticity in how you communicate, because being authentic in your change management program, we found to be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mike was the ultimate ambassador for the entire project with his transparency. So the other thing that was, going back to spaces, the spaces that didn't exist in the existing conditions were things like focus rooms and phone booths and a variety of different sizes of conference spaces. We had a recruitment center that went in that didn't exist before, a very concentrated training room area that was very disparate over 3 or 4 different buildings, but now centralized. So we had to teach folks how to use those spaces. There is an events coordinator that didn't exist, but now does in Johnston, who manages all of those ancillary spaces. And then, of course, the FM team had to actually manage those spaces, which, by the way, there are no garbage cans anywhere under any of these desks.
You want to talk about change management?
Yeah. People were very, I think, of all of the things that we heard during our town halls and our meetings, garbage cans were really the biggest ticket item. I mean, they were very upset about not having a trash can.
There was contraband trash cans.
People were actually labeling their trash cans and moving, and they were going to come. And
They were bringing their trash cans. They left everything else to be moved, and they'd bring their Rubbermaid with them.
Yeah.
And then we'd sneak in at night and take it away, right? Another good sell when you think about change management was we talked about centralized recycling, shredding, printing, trash, but we pitched it as benefit to them, right? So we talked about it from an ergonomic perspective, micro breaks, activity, getting up and moving throughout the day. And it took people a little bit of time. Some people are still in that change curve, right? But it eventually won the day. So it was a unique angle on, it's not that it's easier for the facilities team, even though it really is, but it's beneficial to you. Here's the change and here's how it impacts you.
Yeah, and centralized office supplies. I mean, as part of the change management program, we actually had to evaluate the existing conditions, and there were so many office supplies. We actually had to bring in a nonprofit organization to get them donated to come out of the existing buildings. And that's another great win that we could talk hours about.
We had some people picking through that.
Yeah.
Looking for some pens and paper, though, but...
We also had a lot of new technology that was coming into this building. The hoarding mentality in the old spaces, people were afraid to never let a monitor go because they might need it someday, or a keyboard or a mouse. But all of those items were purchased new and put on the desks in advance of the moves in, and which people were thrilled about, and everyone getting 2 monitors was just, they were very excited about that. But we also had to teach a lot of AV-related items that were all new into the building as well, which there are still some challenges with. We'll talk about that in the last slide. But the process I wanted you guys to take away from is that it needs to be multi-layered. You need to have multiple channels of communication, and not just one works for everybody. And so we spent a lot of time trying to understand what was that process going to look like for citizens, and how is it best going to be received. So that was change management. I'm going to segue to Hugh to talk about how we ended the project.
So we'll quickly wrap with just some thoughts and examples of the changes that we saw on the campus, right? So one of the really fun things are the subtle changes that you notice, not real obvious things. People are actually dressing a little bit better when they're coming to work, which is interesting to see, right? So we're moving into this business casual to casual climate, but when we moved to Johnston, it just looked and felt a little different, right? So people were coming to work, little different sense of space, sense of self, and it's kind of cool to watch. The activity on the stairs in particular, so one of the things about this campus is this active design concept. So when we built it, it looks a little bit like a concourse with terminals. So there's this connector building, and then the office buildings are attached to that. We actually put the stairs in the front of those buildings. You have to walk around them to get to the elevator. So now people just take those stairs by default. Great conversations on the stairs, but one of those subtle indicators that one of the things that was integral to our design really actually worked. The obvious changes, listen, we've got great branding in this campus. So we have never, in the history of our bank since I've been there, had a fully branded facility, and this was done with a great eye toward both content and the way that it was rolled out. So wonderfully branded, obviously happier colleagues. So we saw a nice jump in our organizational health index scores. So that's the satisfaction survey that we all take in various forms. We saw results there, and we actually did a survey with Cushman Wakefield, experience per square foot.
Yep.
That's something that gets a little bit more to the core of what we do in this room, right? And looks at the money that you invested in different parts of the facility and how that turned out. So we saw very tangible results there. Much better collaboration between teams. Just because of the way the buildings are laid out, we're seeing good cross-pollination and good cross-function between teams. Then there are the things that you don't plan for. Whoa, and there were a few, right? So number one, We actually overbuilt parking. So we took, whatever the ratio is today, 70%, right? Something like that. We went to 85% because Rhode Island doesn't have a mass transit system. It has public transportation, but it's not very efficient at moving big loads of people. Even with that, we overtipped our parking like 2 weeks in, right? We didn't have enough places for people to park. They're circling around, they're parking on the road. So we had to actually create another parking lot on the campus to accommodate that. The trash and recycling that I told you guys about, big hit. By the way, you got to empty those things a lot. and so as we were building in this insourced facility management model, because we actually have our own insourced cleaning staff and maintenance staff there, as we were doing that, we just didn't anticipate the amount of times they would have to go throughout the day to keep those receptacles empty and to keep things clean. So that's been a good lesson learned that we hadn't planned for. Unprecedented demand from community partners, right? So in Johnston, Rhode Island, they don't actually have a big banquet facility. So our cafeteria that seats about 700 is by far the largest facility in Johnston. And by the way, that mayor, Joe Policina, who's a great political partner for us, he asked us to have the Little League banquet there this fall, right? So we're going to do that, but we're learning how to deal with community partners and how to make sure that we're utilizing the space, but also not impacting the colleagues who work there in the way we interface with the communities. So we got a really, really big win for the company out of this campus, right? It continues to drive buzz throughout our entire footprint. We're actually in the process of building another facility in Westwood, Massachusetts. So this follows very quickly on the heels. You're talking about a bank that didn't build a new building in its 25-year history that I'm familiar with, and now within 2 years, we've built two. So that speaks to what a transformational experience this was and where we want to go in the future with it.
And I think to close from a change management perspective, as we heard earlier, when you move in, it doesn't stop. So there have been a variety of surveys that we've helped citizens with, from a space utilization survey to understand how the space is being used now that it's been built. They've done the Cushman and Wakefield survey. And then we're meeting with smaller groups and doing some design thinking workshops to help them over the resistance that they're still having for some of those neighborhood and desk ratio components. So overall, I think it was very successful. We were very fortunate to be part of the project. And very shameless plug, the Citizens team has been gracious. They're going to be opening their doors in May and doing tours of their facility on May 8th through another networking organization. But if you're interested in actually to come out to see the property, by all means, let us know. And we can help you give you some information.
You're going to plug your booth?
Oh, and by the way, we do have a booth. Thank you, Steve. If you would like to talk a little bit more about how we have supported citizens and their project, we're located also in our booth this afternoon. So thank you.
Thank you.